Hello and welcome to a new E3 video from MinnMax. I'm Ben Hansen and I'm joined by Kyle Hilliard.
What's up?
Hey, what's up? That's kind of Kyle's kind of vibe. This is it, baby. E3 coverage. MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better, of course. And so I thought, well, we should have my dear friend Kyle on to talk about maybe our last chance to talk about Breath of the Wild sequel before Nintendo rips off that Band-Aid, and with the big stream on Tuesday, which we're going to have reaction streams to, by the way. We're doing reaction streams all throughout the week for E3 stuff at MinnMax, so you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'd appreciate it. But maybe they're just going to reveal everything about Breath of the Wild's mysterious sequel. And Kyle, you literally wrote a book about Zelda, yes?
Yes, I
My
did.
God, there it is. And there's a chapter all about Breath of the Wild sequel. So everybody run to your local bookstore and check it out.
Yeah, I don't think I get any monetary compensation for copies sold anymore. So you can walk. It's fine.
Yeah. But I am just fascinated by zooming in on the smallest little details. Like, what are they going to call Breath of the Wild sequel? That's all they've really referred to it as so far.
The sequel, I think the text on the teaser is the sequel to Breath of the Wild is in development, right? I believe is what it says, yeah.
Yes. And so,
which is not a title.
I mean, knowing Nintendo, they're a little bit unknowable, so maybe that's going to be the final title. But we thought we'd make a video with just our final predictions about the title, maybe a little bit about the game itself. Let's try and get it all out of our system. And now here's the thing. I'm getting excited for this sequel and seeing more. There's always a good chance they won't show it.
I think there's a pretty good chance.
Honestly, what do you think the odds are?
Pretty low. I'm not going in with much optimism, but I'm also I've kind of learned to temper Nintendo expectations through the years, because what do you have to lose by tempering your expectations? Honestly,
so
you know?
I mean, are you putting
a
it
more exciting reveal? That's what you get if you temper expectations.
So you're saying below 50% chance, personally, you think that Nintendo shows Breath of the Wild sequel?
Yeah, and I would love to be wrong. I would absolutely love to be wrong.
So we did a video yesterday where it was Jacob Geller and I, YouTube essay extraordinaire, going back and looking at all of the pre-release trailers for the original Breath of the Wild and pre-release coverage and all that fun stuff. And watching that, I started to realize more and more this worst case scenario of, it could be worse. But I was thinking, like, what if that Switch Pro is real, Breath of the Wild sequel is not ready, which there's a pretty good chance it's far from ready. And so what they do is just spend a lot of their time talking about, look how great Breath of the Wild runs on the Switch Pro. Do you want a 4K 60 version of Breath of the Wild? Check this out. Treehouse Live, it's going to be an hour of looking at sweet 60 frames per second Breath of the Wild. That seems, I would put that at 40% chance.
Yeah, I mean, has Nintendo ever really leaned on that element of a game? Like how good it looks and how well it runs? Has that ever been a pillar of marketing for any Nintendo game?
No, because they didn't have to acknowledge that it wasn't great before. So even something like, 3D World, Bowser's Fury, it wasn't like, that ran like crap on the Wii U. Look at this now. Look how angry Bowser is. You want this thing?
I mean, I think, because I've asked Nintendo about it before, because the question I remember I asked about Odyssey specifically, I think it was like, the file size is so small. How do you guys pull that off, right? And I think for them, it's just a matter of like those elements, like 60 frames, 4K, like that's all just part of making the game play better and run well and be more fun. So they would rather just focus on how much more fun it is. I don't think they care about the tech details.
But if they're scrambling and they realize like, oh my God, COVID has really put a huge hit in development for Breath of the Wild sequel, which last we heard of it, it certainly seemed to be the case, where Aonuma said they were going to try to get us more details this year. So, I mean, they've, in that little bit of messaging, been kind of trying to slow people's rolls. So in that chance of like, we need something to show off the Switch Pro.
To be clear, like I would be happy to have that, like
of course.
I would love a better running Breath of the Wild on a Switch Pro, but it would sting a little because it's like, I'd rather hear about the sequel, but this is great,
Kyle, we're not here to talk about a worst case scenario. We're here to talk about the very exciting sequel to one of the greatest games of all time and try and predict the name. Because my favorite thing is when they reveal something in any medium and then it turns out that somebody guessed that this was going to happen years ago on a forum. Like Game of Thrones was always good for that. Like, wait a minute. Is he called Hodor? Because like those little things of like somebody guessed it at some point, or even like my favorite is in the Double Fine adventure documentary when somebody guessed the twist of Broken Age super early on in the Double Fine forums, and Tim Schafer had to be like, damn it, what are we supposed to do now? It's all right there. Okay.
You just got to ignore it.
So if you're watching this in the future, thank you for being here. Don't spoil anything by leaving a comment in the future and letting us read it right now, because we're trying to go in blind for our predictions for the name of the Breath of the Wild sequel.
Yes.
Kyle?
So you pitched this to me recently, and I've been thinking about it a lot. I kind of categorized Zelda titles into a few different categories.
Ooh, please, yeah.
So there's like Legend of Zelda and Zelda 2, Link's Adventure, which is the only non-legendary Zelda that's not a spin-off. So those are the first two, but then there are Link puns, which accounted for a number. So there's Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, A Link Between Worlds.
Yep.
Link to the Past was called Triforce of the Gods in Japan, and the Link Between Worlds was just called Triforce of the Gods 2, which I think is a factor worth mentioning. They have called a game just 2, in the Zelda series outside of America. And then the other ones are there are characters, right? Twilight Princess is a person.
Yes.
Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons, those are like characters, right? And then the other factor, which is, there's also Triforce Heroes and Four Swords Adventures, which are like borderline spin-offs. So like I don't really categorize those, but the biggest one is just physical objects that are in the game, right?
Yep.
Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Minish Cap, The Wind Waker, The Phantom Hourglass, Skyward Sword, and then Spirit Tracks I think counts in there as like a thing that's in the game.
Which is interesting. I mean, in this Another Look video, which you can find on our YouTube channel, we'd always appreciate if you subscribed. Blah, 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 blah. But in that Another Look video, we went back and saw that there's a moment where Enuma actually explains the naming of Breath of the Wild, which is very relevant here, where he explains exactly that of like, other Zeldas have been about items primarily. And he said with Breath of the Wild, because there's such a huge emphasis on the world, we wanted to emphasize the world. And so that's why it's Breath of the Wild. And so the question is if in the sequel, they're still getting a real kick out of the world, or if now it's like, okay, the world's out of the way. Now we can go back to talking about the golden trinket or some nonsense like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking, I kind of think that it's still going to be more of like leaning on the world.
I think so too.
But I was thinking about some of the trinkets and looking back at the teaser for the sequel to The Breath of the Wild is in development. It's not an item, I guess, per se, but like there is that severed arm that is on Ganon's chest that looks very much to be made of like Twilight energy or Twilight magic. It feels very Twilight Princess. And if it were to be like an item or called something, Legend of Zelda : item, noun, I think it would be whatever that thing is.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it's called really an arm or if it's like maybe a spear or something, but like whatever that thing is, because it seems like Link can equip it in that teaser too.
Kyle, you are barking up the same tree I am. So let's see. So my guess, rewatching that sequel trailer so many times, is it's something to do with hands. Like hands are so dominant throughout that entire trailer. You see, are we just on the same page? That's just Ganon?
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
Yeah, I mean, not confirmed, but like it seems like it's Ganondorf, like something. Yeah.
Okay, but
I don't think it's a new big bad. I don't think, and I also don't think it's like one of the sort of big bads from one of the other games that so it's not actually him, it was Ganon all along,
right. Yeah, but you see that shot of like
from Twilight Princess or something like that.
You see his hand, you see Zelda in the background, obviously the hand like coming down with the green that seems to be imprisoning him. There's a moment where Link and Zelda like grab each other's hands, like Link saves Zelda. There's then a moment where the green magic hand is saving what looks like Zelda again. There's a moment where Link is going bah and his hand's turning all green. So here's my first prediction. Legend of Zelda, The Hands of Time.
I thought you were going to go with The Legend of Zelda, Green Magic Hand.
It's pretty good. Okay, here's another one.
I was also thinking like Hands of Fate because there's like
I thought about that as well.
That's lame.
And there's already another game called Hands of Fate. Not like that would really stop Nintendo, but
and there's one called Hand of Fate 2, I think, right? So, like,
yeah, maybe they just jump right to that. Okay, what about this though?
But like the Fate thing, just real quick, I that comes from the trailer kind of playing in reverse and sort of building towards something, and Fate is like a big part of Zelda anyway. But please continue.
Okay, what about this though? If you want to stick on the big, pun angle, Legend of Zelda. Linking Hands.
All right. Okay. You know, it's funny as I don't think they would go for the Link pun, but the funny thing about it is like this is technically maybe not the only, but like the truest, the really legitimate first time maybe that Link's name is Link and you cannot change it.
Interesting.
You know? Because he's like in every other game he can be whatever you want. But because they had voiceover that used the name Link, they did not let you pick the name for the first time. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. All right, give me a good prediction here, Kyle. Nail something down. Nail something to the wall. So,
it's funny because like I actually don't like this. I think it kind of sounds cliche, but I think it fits the mold of Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
And which is depths of the underworld. Where it's kind of like, you know, because breadth is kind of a pun of like just a big expansive, you know, breadth with a D.
Right.
And like just, you know, an expansive world and how big it is. And there's a lot of implication from that teaser that we're going underground. There's like an explosion underground. They're exploring caves. And like that. So that's kind of where I got with that. Like maybe a lot of your exploration is happening underground in the depths of underworld is the word that I'm like getting hung up on. I think there might be a name for that underground Hyrule.
Some sort of dark
maybe
world?
That they could. Honestly, maybe. I mean, is that what it was in Link to the Past, right? The dark world or something?
I don't think it's literally just
alternate
underground, but
yeah, but yeah, so that's kind of like depths of the underworld is kind of like my closest to Breath of the Wild. It has kind of the same cadence, Breath of the Wild, depths of the underworld.
See, this is the big question.
But it's cliche. It doesn't sound like Zelda. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound specific to Zelda. It could be a subtitle for anything.
Yeah, underworld is interesting. I think this is the big thing, is Breath of the Wild is the best-selling Zelda, right? I believe.
You know, I don't know.
Okay.
It's certainly a huge hit, but I don't know if it's the best.
Okay. Well, regardless, you would think the marketing department is saying in a very Shadow of Mordor / Shadow of War style way, like, you need to carry forward some aspect of that name, find some way to do it. And so having depths be the breath replacement is interesting. And that's the thing, is Nintendo's always unpredictable, so trying to read into it too much, like, okay, if this was any other company, if this was Warner Brothers and they're making the sequel to one of the greatest games of all time, you better believe they would keep some connection to Breath of the Wild. But this is the most I'll go in that direction.
Now you see me too situation.
Exactly, yes. But so this is my other prediction. If they go that direction, the cowardly direction, it's The Legend of Zelda, Curse of the Wild.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Curse is a little bland, but I mean, you get the of the wild in there.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to talk about the boring one, which I really do feel like is going to be probably the direction, which is just Breath of the Wild 2.
Yeah.
Like, I do feel pretty confident about that because, like, one big thing about it for me is, like, people call it Breath of the Wild. They don't call it Zelda Switch. You know what I mean? Like, when people, I don't know, maybe you have a different experience.
I mean, do people call it Zelda GameCube? Like,
I guess not. Yeah, that's true. I guess Zelda has always been pretty good about being referred to by its subtitle.
Yeah.
And Wind Waker is like the one that has had a proper sequel, and they didn't call it Wind Waker 2, but it was also like jumping platforms, so it would be kind of, I think if they had called Phantom Hourglass Wind Waker 2, I think people would have been bummed by that because they're like, oh, this doesn't feel right, you know?
Right.
Like Link's Awakening couldn't really be called Link to the Past 2. It just like would have been unfair in a weird way.
But they still have that Link connection,
like I said,
but yeah.
Because Breath of the Wild is like, even people, because that game had that ability to kind of attract people who maybe hadn't played Zelda in a long time, or maybe it was their first Zelda. And I think those people call it Breath of the Wild. They don't call it Zelda. So I think like the easy marketing answer is Breath of the Wild 2, and Triforce of the Gods 2 exists, so it's not this impossible idea that they're totally opposed to, you know?
Yeah, it reminds me of spending so much time trying to think of what the Red Dead sequel was going to be called, where it's like, okay, Red Dead Revolver, Red Dead Redemption, Red Dead Recuperated, Red Dead
Renaissance.
Everyone was trying to come up with so many clever names, and it's like, oh, they just did the very clear marketing move, Red Dead Redemption 2, and now we're all used to it. Like, of course that's a series, but at the time that was seen as a cowardly way out as well. Okay, here's another boring one, and a lot of this is just, I saw one trailer, so I'm going to call it this. Legend of Zelda, Dark Kingdom.
See, the problem with mine and yours is just they could be subtitles for anything on it, like any sort of movie. They don't feel like Zelda. And where Breath of the Wild was a unique phrase to me. Like it didn't, I'd never heard anything like it before. But once you throw in words like fate and curse and like dark, and it just kind of starts to get muddy. You know, it doesn't feel unique. Yeah,
so that's why you're leaning on it's going to be named after that hand. It's going to be like whatever that thing's named. Like I was going to say Manu, but isn't that other some Manu Hand of Fate or something? But
Manos?
Yeah, what is that? Is that an old film?
That is one of the worst movies ever made. It was like it's like the most a very iconic episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Okay, well that's why it's on the tip of my tongue. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. If that thing's name is Manos, like that's a Zelda name then, because it's nice and specific. Yeah. You can't have a Zelda name be ambiguous. Like all the Zelda names have been pinpointing something. Okay, what about this? What about this? This is another kind of gray area. What about The Legend of Zelda Shadow's Breath?
Yeah, see, that sounds a little more unique to me.
Okay.
Like that the breath, I think, is what cinches it. I actually went to thesaurus.com and put in breath spelled with a D.
Yeah.
Know? And like there's nothing that like really came up that I was like, none of these would fit. So
wait, well, wouldn't you use a synonym? Wouldn't you do a synonym? Wouldn't you do a synonym for? Hang on, just don't stop me. I'm on a synonym roll over here. Wouldn't you put in a synonym for breath instead of breath?
I think breath is like the word they were more going for, like because there's no element of like in Breath of the Wild there is really no like breath item or like breathing isn't really like a factor.
But they're tying in, if we can put ourselves in the minds of Nintendo's marketing team / Treehouse, it's like they're going for like a fresh breath of air, like a new breath for the series type of thing.
Yeah. But it wasn't, I don't know, that I just always saw it as a pun, like a kind of clever pun that I thought worked, that didn't feel cheesy or lame, you know, that it kind of hit both of those words.
Interesting.
Sort of. But maybe I'm alone in that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because that was like Breath of the Wild with a D fits to me as well, because like it's just so huge and vast, and like the opportunity to explore the breadth of everything in front of you is really compelling, you know?
Yeah.
So
what else you got? Any other bold predictions?
I started looking at like items and characters that like in a Majora's Mask kind of direction that maybe they could go, and like some of the ones that I was kind of leaning on. At first I was like maybe Koga, which is like the Yiga clan leader, but he's too much of a goofball to kind of be a title character, and he got his sort of due in Age of Calamity, I feel like. The other ones is Cass, the Wandering Rito, who like sings about you. Like I feel like he could maybe be somewhere in the title. I asked you about you had proposed this question a while ago on Twitter, which I think you want to save that list. But I had half jokingly, half seriously suggested that Kilton, the guy that buys monster parts from you, who only shows up at night, because like be like some like in a Majora's Mask kind of way, Kilton like is a weird character that did not get a lot of airtime in Breath of the Wild. You found him, at least I found him very late in the game, and I think he's really fascinating. And I think he could, in his backpack, you know, mask salesman style, have some weird connection to, you know, Breath of the Wild 2, whatever we call it. And then the other sort of character focused one that I was thinking of isn't so much a character, but there's the Lord of the Mountain that you can, do you know who I'm talking about, or what I'm talking about rather? There's this, I think it's southwest of the map, there's this mountain that you can come across. There's like a little like pond at the top of it, and at certain times of night, there's this like glowing deer that just like glows bright yellow and has these big antlers. And if you get close to it, they'll run away, but you can mount it and ride it around. It's not a creature that you can keep in a stable, but it's called the Lord of the Mountain. And it's this very mythical creature that did not get any story sort of attributed to it. Like you just find it and it's weird, which is like one of the cool things.
What if you can find more of them in the sequel and it's called Legend of Zelda Four Lords? Think about it, Kyle. Just sit on that and think about it for a while.
All right.
Okay, so here's some guesses from Twitter. Okay, ready for these? Let's just rapid fire through these.
Oh, wait, hold on. Let me run quick before I had a couple more words.
Oh, yeah.
I think Sheikah is like interesting and important to Zelda, and you have the Sheikah slate, but I think it's too weird to be a title word because no one will know how to pronounce it if you haven't played the game. Calamity would have been good, but Age of Calamity used it, I think.
Right.
And I don't think they're gonna. I think they're letting that game have Calamity, and also you kind of defeated Calamity in Breath of the Wild. Guardian is another word that might show up in there because the Guardians are very important to Breath of the Wild. And then it's a generic word, but ancient. Something of the ancients, depths of the ancients, something like that. Because that's like, you know, all that technology is ancient technology. That word comes up a lot, and it means more than just like really old. It's referring to a specific sort of group of people in Breath of the Wild. So so that was my list of sort of words that I think could maybe sneak in there that I don't have a ton of confidence in, but I think could fit.
All right, I like it. Okay, here's what we got on Twitter. Aesir Lord says Legend of Zelda Depths of Darkness. Mark Johnson says Zelda Heart of the Wild. Ian Clark says The Legend of Zelda Fate of the Kingdom. Lucas Doe says it's just called Zelda. Very interesting. I like that idea a lot. Let's see. Jokes. Simon says Breath of the Wild, breathe harder. Yep, jokes. We got it. Wario Lemieux says Tribe of the Forgotten. Sir Chen says Breath of the Fallen. Xavier Perez, Legend of Zelda, Zelda's Legend. Okay, we get it with the jokes. Breath of the Halitosis. Okay, jokes. Everyone's a comedian. Jokes. John says The Legend of Zelda, swords don't break this time. Ooh, Danilo says The Legend of Zelda, Rise of Darkness. Samuel Hall says
thematically good, but just kind of generic. You know, Rise of Darkness. You know, that could be a Tomb Raider subtitle.
Ooh, what about this? Glenn Pierce, The Legend of Zelda, Final Breath. Okay, what about
the Wild?
Hugo here says Legend of Zelda, The Death of Ganon.
Yeah, I don't think Ganon's name makes it into the title. I thought about that too.
I think there's a chance. Why do you think not?
Because he never has been. And he's just, I think with Breath of the Wild in particular, like, that's the story of Breath of the Wild is kind of secondary to just being able to explore this big open world. You know what I mean? I think they wanted players to be able to ignore the story if they wanted to, you know?
Yeah.
And for that reason, I think that it's not that important for them to have it in the title, you know, a specific story beat or element, you know?
Yeah. Levo here says The Legend of Zelda, Return of Demise.
I like that. I think that's cool. Demise, I mean, that's like, I'm sort of arguing against what I just said with Ganon being in the title. But Demise, I think, works a little better because it's like an evil word as opposed to a character. And it is also an evil thing, you know, in Zelda.
Yeah. Okay. In the wonderful MinnMax community Discord, Fred says Ganon's Legacy. King Prometheus says Death of the Wild. There we go. Fred guesses Calamity's Reign. Breath of the Wild Part 2 says whatever. Very solid. Chris Logan.
That's the Last of Us approach, right?
Chris Logan guesses The Legend of Link, Zelda's Awakening. Very interesting.
All right.
Groffel says Breath of the Wild 2, The Search for Curly's Gold. Let's see. Jokes. New Frontier. It's interesting. I like that one from, who was that? Where did I miss that one?
Maybe Breath of the Wilder, like Die Harder.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Wilder. Fred says Calamity's Curse. Yep. Fred says he's all in on Calamity. Pretty solid. Bob Beal says Calamity's Wake.
It's a good word. It's a good word that I now associate with Zelda, honestly, Calamity.
Chris Logan guesses The Legend of Zelda Warrior Princess, but seriously, a hint that Zelda is playable could be interesting. Like, if Zelda is playable, I could see them really leaning into that in a big way in the name. That is a good point.
Yeah.
All right, odd Zelda's playable, Kyle. What are you putting at?
I don't know. Lower than I want. I would love for it to be like 90%, but I think realistically it's probably like 40.
Oh, that's even higher than I expected.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want a co-op game, and I kind of worry that that's going to be the lynch of it. Is like you can play as Link and Zelda, and I would be like, can I just play as Zelda by myself, please? Like,
yeah,
is that an option?
Yeah, I hear you. Like, there's some weird stuff in that trailer. Like, is Link when his hand turns all green? Is he turning into then that magic wrinkled hand and then saving Zelda? Because there's a shot of like Zelda falling, and then being grabbed by that green hand. And the chronology is all weird. But like, is there any chance that is Link's hand and that's what's putting him out of the scenario here, out of the picture, as he's kind of being invaded by that ghosty green curse, and that's what is putting Zelda on front and center?
I don't know. That'd be cool. That would be like a really unexpected like thing that I would totally embrace if like Link is just out in the first hour or something, you know, or it's like he's frozen solid in a crystal or something.
He just gets really used to taking like 100-year naps. So after the events of Breath of the Wild, he's like, all right, see you guys later. Going back in my little cute cave.
Is that the canonical explanation for why he just... Well, I guess you can sleep in Breath of the Wild. You just don't have to a ton. I was about to say he doesn't sleep because he slept for 100 years, so he's just got all this pent-up energy.
Hey, Zelda, what are you doing? Come on, let's hang out. Oh, God, no. Okay, what do you think? Maybe it'll be named after that weird... yak-like creature that they're hauling around in the caves in the trailer. Maybe he's a real central point here.
Is that like an elephant? I was like looking at it again, and is it a yak?
It's some weird Zelda thing. You know, it's a little bit of everything.
Yak of the Wild. Okay.
Ooh, okay. What do you think about... This is what I love about rewatching those trailers. It's like, oh, there's just like big obvious things that maybe we aren't talking about or speculating about enough. Like
watching the original Breath of the Wild.
Well, even watching the sequel trailer of just like, yeah, what is actually happening at the end? What is that? Is that Hyrule Castle flying to a new location? What is your read on what is happening there?
You're heading to the moon with the face on it.
Oh, interesting.
God, you know what I would genuinely love is like, which would be very much for me, the super fan, and you know, and others like me, but like I would love just like a Midna's just in it, you know, like she's just there.
Legend of Zelda : Midna's just in it.
Yeah, like just because Zelda's trying to really be isolated experiences, which I think is good, but it's like, and then all the sort of Easter eggs are like fun to look back to. But I would like more direct ties to like previous Zelda things, you know. And I love Midna so much; she's like my favorite companion. I would love for her to be like, you know, jumps out of a portal with like a gun. It's like, Link, we gotta get back.
I cannot imagine anything more off-putting. Jesus Christ!
No, that would be bad. That would be bad. But I would like her to show up and be like, hey, that's my hand. I left it here. My bad.
Don't you like my hand? Did we mention hands yet? So is your theory though that like, or am I just projecting my own, that the shot of the castle kind of like coming out of the ground a little bit is just a sign that like the entire world's being remixed because this Ganon-like figure is being awakened? Comma, is it also the idea that Ganon's being imprisoned by that magic green hand, but then because Zelda falls, then the green hand has to grab Zelda, and that's what we're seeing the shot of, and because they had to save Zelda, then it meant that the hand was off of Ganon for a second, and that's why he wakes up.
Maybe. I mean, that would be an interesting sort of like split-second decision that would have to be made. You know, not by the player necessarily. I don't really want player choice in there. But like, you know, it's like maintain this prison cell or save Zelda, you know, or save Link, you know?
Yeah.
That'd be cool. It's so funny to like talk about this stuff because like I have no idea. Nintendo is so good at like just bringing me something I didn't know I ever wanted, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't anything that I could sort of theorize for like, ooh, I bet that would be cool. Is like Nintendo's probably tried it and been like, no, actually this is more fun. So we made this, and you didn't know you wanted this, but now you have it. So, but like I think I don't see it being like a rearranging. I think it just that whatever's happening there with the castle moving, I think it opens up some new area, some new path, you know what I mean? Like maybe some kind of underground, but I don't want a series of like cave tunnels. It would be cool if there was like a sort of an underground world that you had to explore or something, you know? Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's a pretty logical guess, is that idea of, okay, if they made the entire world for Breath of the Wild, how can we make this work? Could we go to like a Termina like other location? I think it's much easier to just have like, oh, there's a secret underground world. It's kind of like, you know, I mean, Journey to the Center of the Earth.
Spoiler for Wind Waker, if you want to jump ahead here, but I mean, that's kind of an interesting twist at the end of Wind Waker is you go under the ocean.
Right.
And you find that like there, you don't really, it's not this big open area that you can explore, but there is like Hyrule's down there. You know what I mean? Like under the ocean. And like, I like the idea of like going under that Hyrule to see, it's like, oh, this is where the ancients were. This is where they were developing all that technology. Here's their cities, you know, like something like that I think would be really cool.
Yeah, and it'd give a good like avenue for a lot of variety. Because it's like, okay, there's a bunch of different societies down there. They each have wildly different areas and they all have artificial light and the lighting's all different, but it kind of looks like you're outside even. It's like being in, you know, inside at Vegas where they recreate Venice and all that fun stuff. Just basically like those types of environments is what I'm imagining.
Yeah, and maybe you kind of go back and forth between the upper Hyrule, which you know very well, and the lower Hyrule or something. I don't know. You know, we'll see.
Yeah, lower Hyrule, but definitely not low rule. That's something else entirely.
Yeah, that's a different place, you fool.
I don't know why I'm confused about
but yeah,
that.
which is why even my pitch of like depths of the underworld is mostly like that's kind of the avenue it takes if that's what it is. It could be totally something entirely different. I have no idea, but
yeah. Kyle, well, thanks for ending this video on the big note of I have no idea. I don't know anything. Nintendo's going to surprise us the end.
Well, the bummer thing is like the boring thing is like most of my chips are on Breath of the Wild 2, which is like not an exciting conversation, but like it just seems pretty logical, you know?
Yep. And I'm all in on hands. Can't get enough of them.
Yeah.
I'm named after them. I love these things.
You're the son of hand.
That's right. I was born from a hand. It was Glover, actually. All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this bonus video at MinnMax here. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Get ready for a bunch of fun E3 content coming up. You know, streams, reaction streams for all the big press conferences, bonus episodes of the MinnMax Show podcast, which you can subscribe to on your favorite podcast app right now. It's not a Patreon exclusive. But what is a Patreon exclusive is if you want to compete in Trivia Tower. So if you support us at any tier on Patreon, at patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's, even the $2 tier, you can jump in and compete in fun video game trivia. There's examples on our YouTube channel page if you want to check out how this works. But basically, jump into the Patreon, you get a link to the Discord, you can use it in the browser. Jump over there, compete to answer ungoogleable video game questions. And Kyle, this isn't any round of Trivia Tower happening. This is June 20th, Sunday, June 20th. We're having this round of Trivia Tower, and it is the grand round, the grand round, the grand round, which means everybody jumping in, it's going to be basically a battle royale. You answer questions, work your way up the tower, which might look a little bit different, by the way. I'm very excited for that. But work your way to the top. The last person standing, one person in the community, will win $1,000, Kyle. We will mail out a check. It's a big thank you to the community for being so wonderful for so long. So if you want to compete in the grand round of Trivia Tower, you can support us on Patreon at the $2 tier even. We'd appreciate the support. And $2 turning into $1,000? What is this, Dogecoin? I don't know. Is that something, Kyle?
Super stonk?
Yeah, hey, come on, what is this? Anyways, thanks so much, everybody. Stay tuned for a bunch of fun E3 coverage from us, including a new comedy miniseries from Leo Vader and writer Jeff Cork. So look forward to that on MinnMax's YouTube channel as well. It'll be a lot of fun. Cool. All right, thanks so much, Kyle.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Content like this exists because of you. Thank you so much for subscribing on YouTube, sharing it with a friend, and especially for supporting MinnMax on Patreon. Supporters at any tier on Patreon unlock access to MinnMax's Discord, the friendliest place on the internet, where you can compete in game trivia every month to win prizes with our show Trivia Tower. Thanks so much for watching and sharing our stuff, everybody.